Hey, what's up everybody, and welcome back to News Dose. And 2022 has been a bit interesting so far with all of these big acquisitions. Of course, a couple of weeks ago, Sony did buy Bungie for $3.6 billion, and then obviously the Activision Blizzard acquisition. That's the one that has made waves across the industry, where Microsoft picked them up for nearly $70 billion. With that move, though, there has been a lot of talk about maybe some other publishers being picked up. And while I've certainly been a little skeptical about this situation, well, as it turns out, there might be a possibility, after all, that another big publisher could be picked up as they directly responded to this today. Yeah, so we're going to go over that one here a little bit, and then also EA is actually partially blaming Xbox for some of Battlefield 2042's failures, and not because it's directly Xbox's fault, but because apparently one of Xbox's games was really good, while theirs wasn't exactly. So we will go over that one as well. To get things started off today, though, we're going to be talking about Goldeneye 007 yet again. This is something that we talked about earlier this year, as it was spotted that several Rare developers were unlocking Xbox achievements for Goldeneye 007, which kind of implies that maybe they're finally bringing back that canceled Goldeneye 007 remaster. The leak last month was a pretty good indicator of that, but now we are starting to hear a little bit more on this topic, as the VentureBeat journalist Jeff Grubb did say this: I think Microsoft is going to be the one to announce that first. I think this game is probably coming pretty soon. I'm thinking next couple of weeks. Now, this statement here doesn't seem like it's any kind of confirmation or anything like that, but interestingly enough, over on the Video Game Chronicles, they did say that this matches what one source has recently told VGC, in that Microsoft will be the one to announce the revival. There has been some speculation that maybe Nintendo could be the ones to announce the return for Goldeneye, as they actually were the reason that the Goldeneye remaster did not come out in the first place. Nintendo being the original publisher for Goldeneye on Nintendo 64, they own a part of that game, and they blocked this game from releasing on Xbox years later. So the theory now is that because Nintendo has Nintendo Switch Online, maybe Nintendo and Xbox worked out some type of deal to finally bring this game back, and then both can kind of benefit from this release. It actually does make sense, especially with both of them being pretty good partners as of recent, but nonetheless, it is starting to sound like Microsoft will be the ones to announce this Goldeneye remaster. Now it's starting to become a little bit more of when rather than if. And I think for Xbox, there's actually various options that they could do to announce this game. Maybe some type of an event, or really even just a blog post, I think would suffice in this situation. One thing that I would kind of pay attention to is actually Xbox Game Pass, because every month when they announce a new wave of Xbox Game Pass games, they could just say, hey, here's 007 Goldeneye, it's launching directly into Xbox Game Pass, and I think that would get a lot of people excited. So I mean, I think that they could just announce it that way, but I guess we'll see what happens here. But for you Goldeneye fans, it is very much starting to look like this is a real thing, and that Goldeneye will be coming back in 2022. Now, we also do have a bit of a controversy to talk about today regarding PlayStation and Horizon Forbidden West. Not with the game itself, I mean, the game looks absolutely excellent, but actually in how Sony is selling this game. See, if you remember right, there was a big controversy whenever they first announced the price point for Horizon Forbidden West, and that was because it did not feature a free upgrade path to the PlayStation 5 version if you bought it on the PlayStation 4. And this kind of contradicted what Sony had originally said about their cross-generation games. Now, after a lot of criticism from the community, they eventually did decide to backtrack this and said that last year we made a commitment to deliver free upgrades for our cross-gen launch titles, which included Horizon Forbidden West. While the pandemic's profound impact pushed Forbidden West out of the launch window we initially envisioned, we will stand by our offer. Players who purchase Horizon Forbidden West on a PlayStation 4 will be able to upgrade to the PlayStation 5 version for free. And that's great and everything, but what makes this so strange is that even after that, Sony never changed the price point for the PlayStation 5 version. It still costs $10 more, set at $70. Now, the thing about that is you can just go out and buy the PlayStation 4 version for $10 less and just get the free upgrade and you're done. So now it just becomes a point of how aware are you about this free upgrade? And well, Sony's not particularly making that easy, and it almost seems like that they're trying to hide that fact. And now because of that, they are being criticized by a lawyer by the name of Richard Hoeg. He does have his own YouTube channel, which I have watched several of his videos. I do highly recommend checking him out, but let's go check out what he had to say. Folks leapt onto me for my tweet on this a week ago, but there is no defending this kind of business model from the Sony PlayStation folks. They appear to be deliberately confusing the price point in an effort to steal $10 from the uninformed. Duplicity and greed. He does post a side-by-side comparison here, and I think that he is absolutely correct in his assessment. It actually seems quite egregious if you start to look into it, because you can't even access the PlayStation 4 version on the PlayStation 5 digital store. Instead, you'll have to actually go to the PlayStation Store on a web browser to buy it that way if you want that PlayStation 4 version with the free upgrade. And why would they do that? To intentionally keep people unaware of that free upgrade. Because really, there's no advantage of getting the PlayStation 5 version digitally. Now, if you want the box art of the PlayStation 5 version, that's one thing, but digitally, there's no advantage here, and Sony absolutely knows that, and it does seem shady at the very least. Again, though, if you are buying the digital version of Horizon Forbidden West, make sure to buy it on the web store and get that PlayStation 4 version, so you just save an additional $10. Next up here, we do have a very interesting topic to talk about, and that would be about a Ubisoft acquisition. And no, you did not hear that wrong. Ubisoft on a conference call did say that Ubisoft can remain independent, but any offer to buy them would be reviewed. Now, Daniel Maud over on Twitter did point out that this isn't exactly anything outside of what any company would say, and was in response to a question on the call. However, this is quite a change in tone compared to what we have seen in recent years. A couple years ago, Vivendi was looking to take over Ubisoft, and Ubisoft was adamant about staying independent. So this response here is interesting because it doesn't seem like that they feel the way they did just a couple of years ago, and maybe they would be a little open to some different acquisition talks. Now, does that mean that Ubisoft absolutely is going to be acquired? No, that's not what this means, but it does increase the likely chance that it could possibly happen. This certainly is not impossible with them saying that they are open to acquisition talks at the very least. That is a question though. How much would it cost for a Ubisoft acquisition? And that's where things get even more interesting, because this would not be a cheap acquisition by any means. Ubisoft, being one of the biggest publishers in the game industry right now, is set at a $7 billion market cap, but an acquisition would cost far more than that. As an example, they have several notable IP that would drive the cost up even more, including Assassin's Creed. They have Splinter Cell, there's Rayman, they also have franchises like Rainbow Six, so the cost would go up far more than that, because IP is very important, especially when it comes to acquisitions. I mean, you take a look at somebody like Bungie, which sold for $3.6 billion, and all they had was Destiny. So the cost of Ubisoft would be quite expensive. And that's where the question comes in: who could actually buy Ubisoft? And see, I know that a Ubisoft acquisition is interesting in theory, but when you actually start to talk about who could buy Ubisoft, that's where things become a little bit more scary. I think the first thing that a lot of gamers are going to automatically think of is Sony and then Microsoft. But the thing about Microsoft is that they're currently going through regulations when it comes to the Activision Blizzard acquisition. I cannot imagine that they are looking at Ubisoft with those regulations going on right now. So I think that Microsoft is kind of out of the running when it comes to Ubisoft. Now, Sony is a possibility here if they're willing to spend that type of money, and this would again be quite expensive. And that's where other big companies could end up getting involved. Even if you take a look at that Activision Blizzard acquisition, we know that Activision talked to some other big companies such as Facebook. Now, luckily, Microsoft was the ones that picked them up, which I think is the best overall outcome for the future of gaming. But in this situation, if one of these big companies wanted to get their foot into the door when it comes to gaming and to really be taken seriously, then a Ubisoft acquisition could end up being a really good pickup for one of them. And I think that there is a few possibilities that maybe one of these big companies could be interested. And I'm going to take a look at two different ones, one being Amazon and then the other one being Netflix. I think Google was a little bit more hesitant because the failure of Stadia, and Facebook seems to be more focused on VR. So I think Amazon and Netflix are the ones that I'm kind of looking at here. Netflix has said that they are taking gaming very seriously, so I wouldn't be surprised if they want to make more investments. But based off the things that we do know, I'm looking at Amazon as being a prime candidate of a Ubisoft acquisition. Amazon here recently has been having success with gaming. You take a look at New World, and then you take a look at Lost Ark. Both of these games have been very, very successful, and because of that, I could see Amazon investing even more into hardcore gaming. In fact, Ubisoft and Amazon have already partnered up to bring Ubisoft games over to Amazon Luna, their game streaming service. So if they're having some success together, I think Amazon could look at Ubisoft and maybe make them an offer. Again, though, keep in mind that there is not any guarantee when it comes to any type of acquisition, but rather it just seems like it's not really out of the realms of possibilities either. Let me know what you think about all of this, though. If Ubisoft does get acquired, who do you think it would be? Do you think Sony would pick them up, or do you think it might be one of these big corporations such as Amazon? And if that were to happen, would it worry you or not? Let me know in the comments below. On to our final topic of the day, though, and EA made a bit of a strange statement regarding the failures of Battlefield 2042. And yeah, let's just go and jump right into this by looking at the statement that they made. This is coming from EA's Chief Studios Officer that said, "We launched in early access on a Thursday night in the US and Friday morning and afternoon in Europe and Asia. The game was stable. The mean time between failure and hours of the game was in the green by industry standards, and the early critical reception was good. The day-to-day player retention looked strong through the weekend, but then things started to turn. The following Monday, Halo did a surprise release of their multiplayer mode. It was a small segment of the game, but it was very polished, and it was not a favorable comparison to our experience given some of the bugs and polish issues we had." So there you have it. EA is actually partially blaming Halo Infinite for being a good game that Battlefield 2042 had not succeeded. And the thing is that I do partially agree with this statement, but still to hear EA actually point to Halo Infinite as a reason that Battlefield 2042 had failed is quite interesting, to say the least, because I don't know if I can remember a time where a company specifically pointed to another game from a different company as the reason that they failed. I mean, we do all know that this is true to an extent, but to actually hear a company shift blame like this, it's a little unexpected. But this once again just kind of proves what I have said on this channel several times, and that is, do not rush these games to the market, because that's the ultimate reason that Battlefield 2042 has failed. It's ironic that they pointed to Halo Infinite as one of the reasons that Battlefield 2042 failed, because Xbox actually made a smart decision. They did not rush Halo Infinite to the market. They actually delayed this game for an entire year, and well, guess what? That equaled a very polished product, as they said. And then you look at Battlefield 2042, and what's obvious about this game is that it needed a delay. Instead, they rushed it to the market to get those holiday sales, and because of that, they have been cleaning that mess up ever since. At the end of the day, while yes, Halo Infinite has had an effect on Battlefield 2042, I do not disagree with that whatsoever, but at the end of the day, it is EA's fault for rushing this game to the market. If this game would have been good right out of the gate, then this game would have been a success. That's the reason that Halo Infinite has been successful, is because, well, it's a good game. If you make a good game, fans will play it. If you don't, they're going to leave. And because EA didn't exactly launch the best Battlefield game in the world, well, fans are just going to decide to play the better game here, which would, of course, be Halo Infinite. Again, I understand that it plays a part, but ultimately, it just all falls back on EA. Make a better game next time, and then you won't have an excuse to blame another game entirely. Let this just further be an example, though, for the game industry to not rush their games to the market. We saw that with Cyberpunk 2077. We're seeing that with Battlefield 2042. Game publishers, just because you can launch your games in a holiday, doesn't necessarily make that the best overall decision. Make sure your game is good before you release it. Nintendo Shigeru Miyamoto continues to be correct about what he said. A delayed game is eventually good. A bad game is forever bad. Let's go and take a look at the poll of the day, though. And yesterday we did talk a lot about the Wii U and the 3DS eShop closing, but I wanted to know from you all, do you actually still play the Nintendo 3DS? Now, I didn't ask about the Wii U specifically just because not very many people actually own that in the first place, but as for the 3DS, this was a popular console, so I wanted to know. And if you take a look here, 6% of you did say yes, you play it often, 22% of you said yes occasionally, 33% of you said no, and then 37% of you said you don't own a 3DS. So it does actually seem like a good portion of you 3DS owners still do play your 3DS at least occasionally. I actually sit in this category as well. I do play my 3DS occasionally, and in fact, over the last 12 months, I have bought several 3DS games, and just last month, I finished a 3DS game, so I still do play my 3DS occasionally. Now, I will say that I buy most of my games physically if possible, but there are a few situations where that eShop really comes in handy, especially for some of the more expensive games on the market. Atlas games in particular are a little hard to find, and because of that, they are expensive being sold from secondhand sellers, and being able to have access to them on the digital storefront is definitely useful. And then, of course, you do have various games that are exclusively on the eShop. It's always a sad situation when these digital-only games will just kind of disappear forever, stuck on a specific console. The Virtual Console also will be very much missed, especially on the Wii U, which has a fantastic Virtual Console. But I will say one good thing about the Wii U in particular is that, at least when it comes to the big AAA games for the Wii U, most of those have since been ported over to the Nintendo Switch. So at least there is easy access to several of these big Wii U games, though they still need to work on bringing over games like Xenoblade X. There's also Star Fox Zero. And I mean, come on, let's get the Metroid Prime trilogy over to the Switch. One great thing about the Wii U is that it has backwards compatibility with the Wii, and games like the Metroid Prime trilogy, I mean, you can get those at a very affordable price on the eShop. So, I mean, if you have a Wii U, I definitely recommend picking up games like that, but nonetheless, these eShops will be very much missed, to say the least, and it is interesting to see that a good portion of you all still do play your 3DS. Anyways, though, that's it for this episode, but if you liked the video, don't forget to hit the notification and subscribe button for more content just like this. Also, if you'd like to support the channel through Patreon, thank you for making this content possible. Peace out.